Would you like to take a seat? Good afternoon to you all, and a very warm welcome to our celebration of Stewart's life. Alexander Young Stewart Mcloone. Stewart. He was born on the 18th of January 1944, and he died on the 2nd November at the age of 76. We live in strange times, and life for most of us is very different from what we're used to and from how we would like it to be. And we're very conscious that as we meet here, there are many others who in different circumstances would have been here to share this precious time with us, to show their love and respect for Stewart, and their love and support of you, his nearest and dearest. But through the wonders of modern technology, many are listening in live to the webcast or may listen later. So welcome to you all, and know that we include you all in our time here together. We are here today in this beautiful building, nestled in the foothills of the Eildons. This place has seen tears and sadness. It's also seen smiles and laughter and questions. And we are thankful that we can be here today to remember and to celebrate Stewart's life. And here we say our goodbyes to him in ways that hopefully will make sense for us, both today and in the days ahead. So what sort of man was Stewart? He was a very genuine, sincere man, and he was a people person. He was extremely proud of his family, and he went out of his way to support them and to encourage you to believe in yourselves. He was a man who said things that his family will remember and treasure, and one thing he used to say was, "I love you guys." Stewart was born on Mount Pleasant Farm, Lamlish, on the Isle of Arran. The family had gone there to escape the bombing in Greenock. And he was one of a family of 8. There was Thomas, Anna, John, Jim, George, Michael, Stewart, and Evelyn. And of those 8, Jim, Michael, and Evelyn now remain. His mother wanted to call him Stewart because that was the name of the farmer in Lamlash. But the farmer said that if he was to take his name of Stewart, he was to take all of his name. And so he became Alexander Young Stewart Mcloone. And throughout Stewart's childhood, the family would often go back to Lamlash in the summer, helping with the milk delivery to the tourists and also helping with harvest. When Stewart left school, he worked as a mental health nurse while he waited to take up his civil service post with the Customs and Excise, and that was his chosen career. There are a couple of stories from those days, and I hope I don't stand on anybody else's toes who's going to speak. Some of his time was spent on the Clyde as part of a crew trying to catch smugglers. And he used to recall the time that he went on board a boat and the crew had a rope running down the funnel of their ship. And Stewart went and decided he was going to have a wee pull on this rope. And what came up were bottles of brandy, all neatly and carefully tied onto the rope. Other times he'd find packs of cigarettes hidden in bunks and lockers, everyone just trying to avoid paying duty. And then there was a time when he nearly stowed away to Canada. The ship had set sail with him still on board, and they had to get a launch sent out to rescue him. And from being on boats myself, I know that climbing down a rope ladder from one moving vessel to another is no easy task, but he obviously made it. Later, of course, he was posted to the south of England, where he met Margaret and later became father to his two boys, Andy and John. But as with many jobs, the more promotion you get, the further away you get to what you signed up for and to what you enjoyed. He worked for a time at Heathrow Airport and at the VAT office in Cambridge, where he landed up looking after the personnel. It was while in Cambridge that Stewart and Heather met. They met at an Army Cadet First Aid Training course in 1996. Stewart was leading the course. And of course, you all know that the Army Cadets were a huge part of Stewart's life, where he worked his way up to becoming Major of Number 1 Company and Number 3 Company in the Cambridgeshire Army Cadet Force. He was proud of being the one who introduced the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme to the Cambridgeshire Cadets. And there was something else that he was extremely proud of too. I'm going to hand over to Andy now, who will tell us a few things about that time. Where's Andy?
Hi everyone, I'm Andy, I'm Stuart's eldest son. I'm quite impressed with all my cabin today, and it's one of the wonders of technology that so many people around the world will now see this service. One of the things that Dad hated intensely was Facebook. He hated his image being put on Facebook, and he believed that Mark Zuckerberg was going to steal his soul as a result. So I'm sure it would annoy him intensely to know, a day after his passing, I posted a notice on Facebook with some of my favourite photographs of him in army uniform from his cadet days. As a result of which I received 150, I think now, messages of condolence from around the world, from as far as Moscow to Toronto. Now, I wish I could read all of them out to you today, and for the webcam, we haven't got time. So I accept that most of those messages were people being polite and people being kind to me. And most didn't actually know Dad, but some did. And some hadn't heard from him for 20, 30 years. And I'll tell one quick story. And that was a guy called Brian Forsyth messaged me, and he said, so I recognised the photograph, and I remember the guy, that's the Major that sounded like Sean Connery. Now, a bit about that. Firstly, it's a sad coincidence that Sean Connery, the actor, passed away a few days before Dad. But I'm pretty convinced that Dad actually started that comparison himself. And if you ever were in with him in the mess after a few beers, you would get one of your 60s era Sean Connery Bond impressions. But the point I'm trying to make is, from across the world, somebody recognised Dad from his Army Cadet days, and the Army Cadet were such an important part of his life. For over a decade, it's how he met Heather. It formulated a large portion of his life, and indirectly, it's how we're all here today. As Anne's mentioned about his Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme, I just want to mention one last piece of his Army Cadet history. One of the things he was most intensely proud upon was creating the Cambridgeshire Army Cadet Forces Corps of Drums. Against much opposition, it has to be said, and everybody said you could never do that, it will be a shambles. It wasn't. Former Corps of Drums he did, and it was an astounding success, so much so that they were booked to appear at the Peterborough County Show at private corporate functions. And one evening, outside the mess, Dad was asked by the officer to step outside. To his surprise, he found the Corps of Drums present, and they played Flower of Scotland, especially for him, and it reduced him to tears. So in memory of his achievements in the Army Cadet Force and his formation of a Corps of Drums, I would like you to listen to the music, which I've picked today, which is a military quick march, which is the British Grenadier, and it's the principal quick march of the British Army. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. A very familiar piece of music to everyone, I'm sure. As I said, Stewart and Heather met in 1996, and they were married in 1999. And that saw the coming together of the two families. And from what I hear, when you're all able to meet up, you all get on extremely well together. It was after Stewart took early retirement that he and Heather moved up to Scotland, to Melrose. Stewart embraced not only the Scottish culture, but particularly Scottish rugby culture, and even more particularly Melrose RFC, the home of Scottish rugby. Sevens was a time that he enjoyed every year when the family would come up for that time and celebrate together. Stewart would attend home games and away games, wearing his yellow and black scarf that Claire made for him. He attended games at Murrayfield and at Dublin. And a real highlight for him was that just 3 days before he died, he watched Scotland win. And that doesn't happen very often, does it? I'd now like to invite James and Ollie to come forward. Where's James and Ollie?
I'd like to thank you all for being with us today to celebrate the life of Stewart, my grandpa, in the way that he would have wanted. A celebration of his long, full life, which I feel privileged to have been a part of. I have known him all my life, and he's been one of very few constants throughout my years. He was a fantastic friend and a wonderful grandpa. We would have hilarious banter and also set the world to rights in the same day. I would frequently move house, often abroad, but grandpa would always remain sitting in his armchair, wine glass on his little table, probably having nodded off into a gentle doze. He will never wake from that doze now, but he will always remain with me in my mind.
Hello, and I'm Stuart's grandson, as all of you know. I cannot claim to have known my grandpa in his prime, as I was only born when he was 61, so not very long. But I can say, although he's not my biological grandpa, He was like a real grandpa to me. My main memory of him were the simple things, like where we go down to Eyemouth and have a competition for who could build the best sandcastle, or just going down to the coffee shop or the ice cream place. To me, he was not an Army Cadet Major or a customs officer. He was just Grandpa, who had just come back from going to see Melrose play rugby, or just going to grab a newspaper. He will forever be with me, sitting in his armchair. Thank you for coming to this funeral.
Thank you, James and Ollie. A few little snippets. Stewart loved to travel. He saw a fair bit of Europe and as far away as Australia and New Zealand. He was someone who loved hill walking, and there's plenty of that around here in the Borders. He wasn't really a reader, but he did enjoy his newspaper. And he had a keen interest in politics, and he liked to discuss politics. And he enjoyed watching election results programs. I wonder what he would have made of the American president's election this week. But during the time of the Scottish independence referendum, I think that was 2014, Stewart and Heather were on holiday in a wee cottage beside Newton Moor train station. And he sat up all night with friends Roy and Helen and a bottle of whiskey for company. And by morning, the bottle of whiskey was empty, but Stewart was pleased to learn that Scotland was still part of the United Kingdom. He was a very loyal Scot, proud to be Scottish and also proud to be British. He liked to wear a kilt for important occasions. Now, Heather phrased this for important occasions and at New Year, so I don't know whether New Year wasn't important, but he liked to wear his kilt then too. He joined his local bowling club. He did intend to play, but he didn't get around to it, so he became a social member. And he was both humble and proud to call the members there his friends, and I believe a few of those friends are listening in today. John has passed on a few thoughts. He says that one year, Stewart persuaded the entire clientele of the Five Bells to give up smoking as a New Year's resolution. And although 3 people managed at least a year, Stewart managed January 1. At some point in his lifetime, he learned to play the bagpipes. Eventually, he did manage to make a good sound, but he could only play the one tune. And a weekly father and son cooking night, trying to create haute cuisine, degenerated into the weekly hotter than last week curry night. And a few words from Fiona. Stewart was an enthusiastically appreciative dinner guest, always complimenting her food. And she too has fond memories of Stewart, alongside her father signing the register as witnesses to her wedding. I'd like to invite Alan up now. Alan.
There's no pockets in this jacket. Stewart, the Big Mac Maccas, the Sparkle in Magic and Sparkle, the M&S in M&S, the old Git. Stewart, as Mum would say, after we've each shared half a sip of shandy. Never dad or father, not to me, but to Hannah, a much-loved daddy number 2. Stories of loot found in car chassis, down the ship's chimneys, first-class dinners with the captain, and then a career in customs and excise. Stewart's stories were legendary, and thank you to John in particular for capturing the life story, which we're going to enjoy presently. There are many stories, many fond memories, hunting Scottish wildcats, driving over and under the Mealau Viaduct, erecting fences, watching red squirrels, drinking gin in bank vaults, that was us, not the squirrels, watching the Ladyboys of Bangkok at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, removing the viruses from Stewart's computer after he searched for the Ladyboys of Bangkok after seeing them at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, sipping whiskey in Dalwhinnie, changing the language of Thomasina, probably after sipping the whiskey. From names to games. Near the end, parlour games usually bored Stewart, but it wasn't always the case. Let me articulate my point with an example. No, not taboo. We had enough of that before with the Ladyboys. The board game Articulate. You know when you're in a PE lesson and someone else is choosing the teams? So I ended up with Stewart. And as a reminder, Articulate, of all the words to get wrong, has categories for object, action, person, random, and for me, the dreaded dark blue world. When your playing piece lands on a category, you, the team member doing the guessing, the team member doing the reading, the umpire, in fact, everyone knows the category. Luckily, at the best possible moment, Stewart's describing skills reached their zenith, the local maximum, the peak. You find this up a tree. Leaf? No. Apple? No. Branch? No. Stewart was waiting for the word monkey. Unfortunately, of course, the category was world, and the answer, which Stewart had in front of him, was the Atlantic Ocean. You find this up a tree, the Atlantic Ocean. Thanks, Stewart. I remember with Stewart losing, again, perhaps too much red wine. On to rugby. We've had some rugby stories, so I'll keep this brief. Stewart introduced Hannah and I to rugby. It didn't surprise me that Stewart always loved watching grown men kick their funny-shaped balls around, but he was the first also to acknowledge a good, clean tackle. Yep, I went there. Hannah, Stewart and I even went to Edinburgh to watch a game, not at Murrayfield as previously, but at Meggetland. I can't remember who won. I think it was Melrose. Won too many Guinnesses again. From Edinburgh to London, for Hannah's birthday and mine, both in mid-December, we arranged to go up the Shard. It was a little cloudy, we couldn't see anything. We went back. A few days later, it was clear, it was stunning. We all had fantastic memories of spotting bits of London none of us had seen before, and from memory, the prospect of Whitby serves a good pint as well. Going to close paraphrasing, of all things, The Haunting of Hill House, available on Netflix, if you're interested. The mum and dad are explaining what a eulogy is to their daughter whose kittens died, encouraging her to say a few words. Mum suggests she could tell a story, but what kind? Whatever you like. You know how a picture captures a moment? Stories do that too. So when we die, we turn into stories. And every time someone tells one of those stories, it's like they're still here. We're all just stories in the end. Or perhaps Banksy put it better with his quote, "I mean, they say you die twice. One time when you stop breathing, and a second time a bit later on when somebody says your name for the last time." To Stewart.
Thank you. Stewart received a terminal diagnosis only 10.5 weeks before he died. But with amazing support from his family and friends, he was able to stay at home. And in his final days, he was indeed able to see all of his family. And he died peacefully with Heather at his bedside, a man knowing that he was loved. Would you please stand for the committal? For everything there is a season and a time to every purpose here on earth, a time to be born and a time to die. We have been remembering with gratitude Stewart's life, and we now commit his body to be cremated. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. In the cycle of life and of death, the earth is replenished and life is renewed. Into the freedom of wind and of sunshine, we let you go. Into the dance of the stars and the planets, we let you go. Into the wind's breath and the hands of the star maker, we let you go. We love you and we miss you. Would you please be seated? Andy?
To follow on from Dad's Army Cadet Force service, although he's been retired from that for over 2 decades now. We thought of a way to finally commemorate and end this service. I'll tell you a quick story. Dad had his enemies in the Army Cadet Force. We all make enemies wherever we go. There's always somebody that doesn't like you. And a crusty old colonel once accused him of being unsoldierly. Now, Dad found that amusing and fair comment. Dad had absolutely no operational military pretensions. He considered himself a youth leader in the Army Cadet Force. But he held the rank of Major, and he held the Queen's Commission. And it is traditional to send off somebody who has served their country in whatever capacity, and Dad did serve his country as a youth leader, with the sounding of the last post. For those of you not familiar with it, the last post is a bugle call that is sounded when, at the end of the night, the last sentry post has been inspected by the officer of the watch, and the camp may rest. At military funerals and funerals of those who have served their country, it is sounded as the final farewell.
We are now coming towards the end of our time together, and Heather would like to say a huge thank you to both family and to friends for the tremendous amount of support that they have given over this difficult time. Here are some words from Heather. Before Stewart died, we discussed whether to have flowers. The answer was no. Instead, we decided between us to raise money for replacement curtains in the male bay of Ward 6 at Borders General Hospital, where Stewart's condition was assessed. While receiving the diagnosis of terminal lung cancer, and much to the embarrassment of the consultant, we were not awarded the dignity and privacy that one would expect at such a difficult time, because the curtains around the bed didn't meet. We decided there and then that the purchase of curtains would be something that we could try to provide. And this would give patients in the future a much less stressful experience at such a difficult time, and would be a fitting tribute to Stewart. I will read out the Just Giving page, but I'm sure if anybody wants it, Heather will be able to send it to you. So you can donate at www.justgiving.com/fundraising/Ward 6 curtains. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. And now, Heather's personal tribute to Stewart. For me, Stewart was the person I admired, aspired to be, treasured, learned so much from, and loved so dearly. I feel so honoured and privileged that he chose me as the person he wished to share part of his life with for nearly 25 years, and will always treasure the wonderful memories we have of our life together, firstly through our shared time in the Army Cadet Force, and then as his wife. On Stewart's 70th birthday, there was a family party, and on that day, he said that everyone in the room he wanted to be at his funeral, and you are all here. Stewart had a depth of love for his family that was very, very special. We have shared together some of our memories of Stewart, and there are other memories that you might continue to share later, but then there are yet more memories that you might choose to keep and to treasure in your own hearts. Before the last post, we conclude our time together with a Celtic blessing. May the raindrops fall lightly upon your brow. May the soft winds freshen your spirit. May the sunshine brighten your heart. May the burdens of the day rest lightly upon you until we meet again. Thank you for being here today for Stewart. Would you all please stand?